These locomotives, the Walthers Mainline Sound, have a value-based decoder. It's the ESU Essential Sound Unit decoder. I'm just going to show you some of the features of the sound decoder with the LokProgrammer software. So I have one of the chop nose Jeeps on the programming track 9174. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read the decoder. Now again, I know that the instructions talk about you can use the LokProgrammer, but you cannot change sound files, and that is absolutely true. But what you can do is you can do a lot of, you can do some programming with this. You do not need to use JMRI or your programming track if you need to. So one of the things that I do always with my new decoders, I'm just going to do a real quick check for updated decoder firmware. So under the tools setting, just come down here and click on update decoder firmware. I do know the firmware on these locomotives is out of date. So I'm going to go ahead and change this here or let it update. Then I'm just going to show you a couple of features that you can do. One of the things in my video, even though I showed you the functions of the dynamic brakes, the Illinois Central GP9s do not prototypically have dynamic brakes. So I'm actually going to disable that feature, and I'll show you how to do that. Takes it a good 30-45 seconds to do the decoder firmware update. So I'm going to go ahead and let this finish up here. Second thing I'm going to do, we're going to change the default address of 3 to this locomotive's actual road number, which is 9174. And then we're going to go ahead and this one right here, the red arrow, write the decoder. Make sure this overwrite defaults is unchecked. Click next. So you can run these locomotives in a consist, and right down here, these are the functions that are activated in a consist. The lights are disabled, so if you wanted to run your lights in the consist, you'd have to change that here. The prime mover sound is enabled, dynamic brakes are enabled, everything else is disabled. So go ahead and come down here to the function mapping, and here are your functions. It's pretty simple. You have sound slots. One is your prime mover. Sound slot 2, I believe, is down here. I don't see sound slot 2. Sound slot 3 is F2, which is the bell. Sound slot 4 is F1, which is the horn. Sound slot 5 is F3, which is the coupler. Sound slot 6 is function 7, which is the compressor. Sound slot 7 is the dynamic brake sound. And then that is it for the sound slots. Another thing that you cannot change on these are basic decoders, so we can't change the sound values or load a sound project in. It does have a couple different horn sounds. If you wanted to change the horn sound, consult your manual that comes with the locomotive. It tells you which CVs to change to get a different horn. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to disable the dynamic brakes here just because this locomotive does not have dynamic brakes. So F4, I just unchecked all of those. Come down here, reverse F4. So it's pretty basic. If you're used to a Lok Sound 4, Lok Sound 5, Lok Sound Select decoder, you can do a lot of really neat things with changing whether the functions are enabled forward versus reverse. You can put different light functions on here. Again, on the 4, 5, or select. Let's go ahead and write this to change the dynamic brake disablement. A couple of the things I'm just going to take a look at here. So this function output here is where you certainly could, these are grayed out, front headlight 2, rear headlight 2. This is where you could do your dimmer. Unfortunately on this one we can't change There's no function that allows the headlight or the rear light to dim. Now we can actually change the brightness, but you can't use a separate lighting function to create a dim approach. So again, these are basic decoders. Here's our function settings. We can come down here and click on manual CV changes if you wanted to make some CV changes. Motor settings. In my initial testing, I was it's set up as kind of a logarithmic plot here. I'm just going to go ahead, for now, I'm going to change this to a linear speed table, so I get a little bit faster response of the locomotive when I'm in a lower speed step setting on my hand throttle. Go ahead and come down here and click on sound settings. Talks about steam chuffs. These are obviously diesel locomotives. I'm going to back down the master volume just a little bit, mostly because I have pretty sensitive ears and I'm in a fairly small room, and Athearn locomotives are habitually just ridiculously loud out of the box. I get it in a club setting, you need that, but in a private small room that I'm in, it's unnecessary. Again, all of these sound slots are grayed out. So in a nutshell, that is what you're able to change with these Essential Sound Unit decoders. Before I exit, I'm just going to go File, Save As. I have a LokProgrammer 5 folder here, so I'm going to name this one 9174. Go ahead and save that. And that's it. So you can go File, Close the project, and that is, in a nutshell, what you're able to change on these ESU Essential Sound Unit decoders. So